Secretary General Ban Ki-moon and Chairman Zandanshatar Gombojav and President Eun Mee, distinguished speakers, participants, colleagues and friends. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the 2024 Trans-Pacific Sustainability Dialogue. I'm Gi-Wook Shin, the Director of Stanford University, Walter Shorenstein Asia Pacific Research Center. So on behalf of the center, known as APARC, there are a lot of acronyms here, I'm very happy to welcome all of you to Stanford and the third annual dialogue. It's a unique privilege to gather such a distinguished group of cross-sector leaders and innovators, many of whom have joined us from far and wide. I'd like to express my deepest gratitude to the Ban Ki-moon Foundation for a Better Future, our close partner in supporting and co-hosting the TPSD since its inception, and especially to Mr. Ban, the Foundation's chairman and the 8th Secretary General of the United Nations. We are also so honored to partner with such a visionary organization led by a global statesman whose work has left an indelible mark on the world stage. Our collaboration started with a shared vision to fast-track the United Nations adopted 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and its underlying 17 Sustainable Goals, or SDGs. So to that end, our center and the Ban Ki-moon Foundation established this dialogue in 2022 in the aftermath of COVID-19 as a platform that brings together social science researchers and scientists from Stanford and across the Asia-Pacific region, along with experts from the private and public sectors to spur transnational research and policy collaborations to expedite the implementation of the SDGs. So this year's TPSD, actually the first we host on this campus, follows 4 convenings held in South Korea and Mongolia, each building on the collective energy of dozens of experts from Asia, United States, and beyond. As we come together today, we aim to expand the cross-disciplinary collaboration network, focusing this year on SDG 9, industry, innovation, and infrastructure. Yet we must acknowledge the challenges that stand in our way. With just 6 years remaining until 2030, we are at great risk of missing SDGs. Consider SDG 9, the topic for this year in particular. According to the latest data from the United Nations, despite some pockets of progress, the world is severely lagging, with most countries recording negative or stagnant trends across all industry-related SDG 9 targets. Manufacturing growth remains uneven in many regions. Infrastructure gaps persist. Global CO2 emissions have hit a record high, and the investment needed for innovation to drive sustainable transformation are lacking. These challenges are confounded by the geopolitical and economic uncertainties that define our time. The ongoing Russian-Ukraine war, the escalating conflict in the Middle East, heightened tensions between global powers, and persisting inflation, all of these threaten not only regional and international peace and stability, but also the progress we need to make towards achieving the SDGs and the 2030 Agenda vision as a whole. The urgency for swift action has never been clearer. Against this backdrop, the United Nations Industrial Development Organization, this is the custodian agency for the industry-related indicators of SDG 9, highlights in recent reports that SDG 9 plays a key role in the broader SDGs framework. Indeed, industrial development is a foundation of economic growth and prosperity and is inherently connected to technological achievement, economic resilience, and the green transition. So this year's TPSD, therefore, centers on examining where interventions are most urgently needed to close disparities in achieving SDG 9 and pathways to expedite progress. There is no better place for this conversation than Stanford, our campus. As you know, we cannot think about Silicon Valley without contribution from Stanford, with its long track record as a hub of innovation where disciplines converge and revolutionary ideas take shape. Our university is uniquely positioned to accelerate solutions while accounting for their societal and ethical impact. I'd like to emphasize this one again, accelerating solutions while accounting for their societal and ethical impact. Innovation is not just something we talk about here. It is woven into the fabric of our community. From our labs to our classroom to our industry partnership, we are committed to translating research into real-world impact with sustainability at the core of the vision. The Stanford innovation ethos and emphasis on accelerating solutions are exactly what SDG 9 requires of us. Creative, forward-thinking solutions to build infrastructure that is not only resilient, but also equitable. Innovations that drive inclusive industrialization and empower communities around the world to thrive, and networks that leverage global collaboration to address intractable problems. I want to take this opportunity to recognize our co-organizing partners, the Asian Development Bank, Ewha Women's University, and Fijian Competition and Consumer Commission, and the Korea Environment Institute, and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Korea, and the Natural Capital Project at Stanford. Each of these organizations brings a unique perspective to our dialogue, and their collaboration ensures that discussions we will have over the next 2 days are truly cross-sector and cross-disciplinary. I'm also deeply grateful to our speakers, participants, and guests for joining us today. Your presence and your voice will make this dialogue influential, and I look forward to the outcome as we generate together. Finally, I wanted to express appreciation for our team members who have put great effort into planning and executing this great event, especially the members of steering committee, Noah, Cheryl, Denise from our side, and the Ambassador Kim Bong-yeon from the Ban Foundation. Okay, now I'd like to turn things over to my colleague, Dr. Jin Oi, the William Haas Professor of Chinese Politics at Stanford and Senior Fellow at the Freeman Spogli Institute for International Studies. So Jin is not only a leader in our APARC community, but also in advancing US-Asia academic exchange. An expert on political economy and reform in China, Jin is the founding director of China program at our center, and the founding Lucia Ki, director of the Stanford Center at Beijing University. So she will moderate our first plenary session this morning, which brings together a remarkable group of world leaders. So Jin, the floor is yours. Thank you all.
Good morning. Thank you very much, Gi-Wook. And thank you for giving me the honor of chairing this first panel of the world leaders. Now, clearly, I think you've provided us with an excellent introduction, but I just want to underscore that the targets for the target 9 of the SDGs is pretty, I mean, it's very ambitious goals, and it's meaning that it's very difficult. And so, as you've already outlined, given the current global conditions, geopolitical, both that affect domestic politics as well, achieving these goals is very difficult. And so, clearly, what we need and what this first panel is about is hearing the visions of leaders, of world leaders in different sectors. And so, today we are very fortunate to have a global statesman, to have leaders from important countries and countries that are trying to develop, as well as leaders of higher education, as well as leaders here at Stanford that are in charge of training our future leaders in the world. And so I'm not going to take too much time because you're here to hear our speakers. So I'm just going to very briefly just mention our speakers. They really don't need much introduction. Let me first introduce them and then invite them to join me on the stage. Let me start out by saying that I'm very honored to have Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, who is the 8th Secretary General of the United Nations, be our first speaker. And he's also the chairman of the Ban Ki-moon Foundation for a Better Future, as Gi-Wook has indicated. And then second, I'm very pleased to welcome Chairman Zandanshatar Gombojav, who is the chairman of the 7th and 8th Parliament of Mongolia. And then after he speaks, we're very pleased to welcome an old colleague whom I've edited a book with, President Eun Mee Kim, who's the president of Ewha University. She's the 17th president, and I had the pleasure of meeting with her as she first came into office a few years ago, and now she tells me this is her last year, so she's got a lot of insights. And then finally, I like to welcome my own colleague, Professor Francis Fukuyama, who has many hats, but for the purposes of today's discussion, he's a senior fellow at FSI, but he's the director of the Ford Dorsey Masters in International Policy, which is a leading program that is training future leaders of the world. And so with that, may I please invite the members of the panel to join us up on the stage, and then I'm going to just turn it over to Secretary Ban Ki-moon. And the way we're going to run this is that I've asked each speaker to speak no more than 10 minutes, because I want to then leave time for discussion and questions from the audience. So please, help me welcome our panelists.
Thank you, Professor Jin-oi, for your warm introduction. Distinguished guests, professors, students, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It is my great honor and pleasure to stand this podium again and also to visit this beautiful Stanford University campus again as a co-host of the third TPSD Trans-Pacific Sustainability Dialogue. At the outset, I'd like to express my sincere gratitude to Stanford University, in particular, Professor Shin Gi-Wook and the Walter H. Shorenstein Asia Pacific Research Center, Shorenstein APARC, for providing the impressive venue, sound logistics, and guiding ideas for this timely event. The 2024 TPSD will showcase the firm commitment of APARC and the Ban Ki-moon Foundation for a Better Future to advance stronger and more effective international cooperation to put the impetus in the implementation of the SDGs. Each and every goal of the SDG is closely intertwined toward the object of realizing harmony between humanity and nature, and eventuality leaving no one behind. In fact, after my retirement from the United Nations, I have been asked many easy questions, easy to ask, but very difficult to answer. What are you proud of your achievement during 10 years service as a Secretary General? Normally, I would answer, during my time as a Secretary General, the member states, global leaders agreed to adopt sustainable development goals with the 17 goals and Paris Climate Change Agreement. These are clearly two achievements which happened during my time. I don't claim that it happened because of me, but you can be sure that I did all my efforts with passion and compassion to realize these two agreements. I think this is by far the most ambitious and far-reaching visions the United Nations, during its 79 years history up to today, has ever presented to the people of the world. Then there would be just one and a half. My name is Ban, surname is Ban. Ban sometimes, even though they say jokingly, Ban means a half. Ban means a half. Then I realized that just half what should be done. That's women's empowerment. So I finished 2.5. I left to my successor to do it for him, to complete this women's empowerment during his time. Let us see what will happen. In any way, ladies and gentlemen, this year's TPSD built on the momentum fostered previously in Seoul and Mongolia, where we discussed SDG 7, energy security, at the 2023, last year, TPSD in Seoul, and SDG 16, peace and justice in Mongolia, April this year. Today, with just 6 years remaining before the completion deadline of the Sustainable Development Goals, progress on the 2030 agenda is severely lagging behind worldwide. Indeed, according to the 2024 Sustainable Development Goals report, only less than 20%, they say 17%, but I'm not sure. But in any way, it's clear that it's less than 20% of the SDG targets are on track. And nearly half are showing minimal or moderate progress. Just last month, as you all have seen in the report, the United Nations held the landmark Summit of the Future in New York City. I was there. There, world leaders unanimously adopted a pact for the future, that includes a global digital compact and a declaration on future generations. At the summit, member states, particularly political leaders, they were fully committed to accelerate implementation of the 2030 agenda, as well as to reduce global disparities in science, technology, and innovation, which we are going to discuss. Critically, world leaders also committed to more funding for SDG-related research and innovation. Under this backdrop, I am of the view that this year's TPSD topic on SDG number 9, namely building resilient infrastructure, promoting inclusive and sustainable industrialization, and fostering innovation, is both timely and relevant. Ladies and gentlemen, we are now under tremendous pressure from the accelerating climate crisis. Without addressing this serious challenge, all of the goals of SDG, 17 goals, including SDG 9, which we are going to discuss this morning, cannot be properly achieved. Indeed, the climate crisis constitutes an existential threat to all lives on the planet. That is why, even though climate change is part of SDG, number 13, then member states have decided, let us take this climate change. This is too important because SDGs are not binding. It's a political commitment. Whether you keep it or not, there is no way for us to do. But climate change, so urgent, so important, and even dangerous for planet and our human being, they decided to have it as a binding force, which has a binding force, a treaty, international treaty. That's why we had separate parallel track, SDG negotiation and Paris climate change negotiation. It took much, much more difficult in having this binding treaty. It was done December 12, 2015. So year 2015 was very historic in the history of the United Nations. Those two most important, most ambitious, far-reaching visions and agreement were done in the same year. Even Pope came to the United Nations. This is very rare. And I have never seen in the history of the United Nations more than 160 heads of state and government were in one place. Security-wise, it must have been very dangerous. Normally, during the 2 weeks' time, the leaders come to the United Nations Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, whenever they are convenient. But there was no such time when more than 160 leaders got one place, starting from US, China, and Russia, everybody was there in one place in Paris. So this is quite historic. That was the only ones. I hope that will not be the last one. In any way, ladies and gentlemen, my successor, Antonio Guterres, Secretary General, recently issued a grave statement that the challenges we face are moving much faster than our ability to resolve them. During my tenure, for 10 years at the United Nations, I also issued the serious, almost the same serious issue warning to the international community that we have no plan B because we do not have Planet B either. This has been much often quoted by world's people. You may quote. It doesn't have any legal problems, so you can do it. And this is still true today. As a dramatic mitigation of rampant carbon emissions is the only plan for our survival. In this connection, every country must abide by its own national NDCs, nationally determined contributions, commitment to the Paris Accord. That means by 2050, we must make carbon emission zero by 2050. By 2030, 43% cut before going to 0%. These are strong commitments. The Pact for the Future, which was adopted, which I mentioned last month at the United Nations, confirmed the urgent need to keep global temperature rise to below 1.5 degrees Celsius, above pre-industrial levels, as well as to transition away from fossil fuels in energy systems to achieve net zero by 2050. But unfortunately, the WMO has already declared that the global temperature rise has risen above 1.5 degrees already. This is a really serious issue, but still we have time to really fight back against this. Ladies and gentlemen, the private sectors hold the prime responsibility for carbon dioxide emissions and must significantly elevate their own mitigation efforts. Individuals must also pay keen attention to the climate crisis and do more to help reduce their own carbon footprint. This is what I try to mean. You may say, I'm alone, I'm private citizen, I'm professor, I'm not responsible. But each and every one of you, whatever you may be doing, you are responsible for this. Government cannot do it alone. There is no such government in this world which can exercise full power on this matter. Therefore, we have to work together. We have to join our hands on the deck together. Otherwise, there's no way. However powerful one nation may be, or resourceful one nation may be, there is no such country, no such person who can do it alone. We have to work together. This is what I learned during my time at the United Nations and after my retirement, meeting and traveling around the world. You may be sure that I have traveled all the places on the earth, wherever there's a climate phenomena are happening. 4 times in Arctic, 1 time in Antarctica, and many other places, small island developing state or desert area, etc., etc. Therefore, I really wanted to do it for myself so that I can have the force in my voice. When I didn't go anywhere, I didn't see any place, then I could not say, just read out my text, prepared my staff. But I am just speaking out of my own experience. So you can trust what I am saying. Ladies and gentlemen, in any way, this is the first ever case in the world in which all countries and people must work together. Government, businesses, and civil societies. This tripartite partnership should work together. Ladies and gentlemen, the European Union is actively leading this campaign. They are going to enforce through a law called CBAM. This is carbon border adjustment mechanism. This is not a joke. This is real serious. From 2035, all this, except electric cars, when diesel cars, gasoline cars, they will be heavily taxed. So there will be no need, no benefit of exporting cars or any whatever will contain the dioxide, carbon dioxide. Therefore, this is just one example of crucial collective efforts to affect other countries to change their routine behavior of emitting carbon dioxide in their manufacturing process. A lot of manufacturing companies will be positively affected by this policy of the European Union. I really wanted, I'm just a private citizen, but I met the chairman of Hyundai Motor Company. I visited twice the POSCO. The POSCO company produces 12% of carbon dioxide out of 100% of Korea. One company. I just told them, you have no future unless you don't change this coal burning system into other systems. So they are all changing. So now people are now very serious about all this. On September 25th this year, I publicly urged the governments to negotiate a fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty. This is like NPT for fossil fuel. In an important speech at the Global Citizen Now Summit in New York City. By endorsing the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty initiative, I am actively calling on world leaders to unite around the comprehensive framework that effectively phases out the main cause of climate crisis like oil, gas, and coal. To synergize critical progress in these efforts, innovation in science and technology is the most essential factor. For example, the perfectly safe nuclear reactors can be a game changer. In addition, technological advances and innovations related to renewable energy resources, nuclear fusion, carbon capture technology, artificial photosynthesis, and others will all dramatically reduce carbon emissions. It will be a difficult competition among related companies to make tangible success in technology innovation. Successful companies will survive and others will perish. This is reality, which many companies are already experiencing. Creative thinking is key for innovation. Creativity must be cultivated early to develop original thinking and the capacity to approach challenges with new approaches. Especially fostering innovation for young people through our education systems is vital so that they have the ability to solve future problems, discover new opportunities, and improve living standards and help our vulnerable planet. To witness true innovation, first of all, we must be prepared for a disruption to traditional practices. According to the IPCC Sixth Assessment Report, the risks we face now are not just the physical risks from the impact of climate change. The more critical risks in responding to climate change are the so-called transition risks. That mean the existing laws, acts, and our practices are so rigid that they could be the barriers to introducing crucial new systems and solutions. I hope that the governments will just closely look at their domestic legislations. While this may sound a bit dramatic, this simply means that we must proactively explore new ways of learning and creating a culture for innovation, as we simultaneously realize the green transition for all people and our planet. Collaboration between government, industry, and academia fosters meaningful change for innovation. The mobilization of partnerships is also vital in nurturing the momentum that both promotes and facilitates innovation. International cooperation is needed to support developing countries in building a culture of innovation. Artificial intelligence capacities, as well as efforts to address the potential negative impacts of emerging digital technologies. In this regard, leaders at the Summit of the Future last month made the first global commitment to digital public goods and global public infrastructure. We have to closely follow the Pact for the Future adopted on September 22nd this year at the United Nations. We have no other options. We simply must cooperate with each other, coexist with nature, and implement the SDGs. Ladies and gentlemen, finally, I'd like to quote the last words of Steve Jobs, the monumental business and innovation icon. He said, quote, unquote, cherish others, unquote. Our ideal is peaceful, but the reality is turbulent. Let us all get united and cherish others. Then our ideal will come true. This is a true key to implementing the SDGs within harmony between the advanced and developing countries. These are subjects which we are going to discuss this year, and let us work together to realize a better and sustainable future for all. This is your and my moral responsibility, because we are not working for the government, but we are all academics and working very important jobs in civil societies and academia. Let us teach our students, and this is our work today. And thank you very much for attention and commitment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Secretary General Ban, for giving us sort of the global perspective and the challenge that we all face. Now let me call Chairman Zandanshatar to take the view to within one country. And he'll be talking about political leadership in fostering sustainable innovation through legislation and regional partnerships, specifically talking about his experience with Mongolia. Chairman.
Thank you, Professor Jinoi, for a comprehensive introduction, and esteemed academics and researchers. His Excellency, Mr. Ban Ki-moon, Professor Shin Gi-wook, ladies and gentlemen. So first of all, I'd like to express my greetings by your own languages. Ban Ki-moon, 한국 분들 안녕하십니까? Ni hao, 한국란, 한국인, konnichiwa. So by this, my multi-language ability is finishing. So, Sambano. So, I am very happy to be back here and speak at this Trans-Pacific Sustainability Dialogue organized by the Stanford University, APARC, and Ban Ki-moon Foundation. Stanford is place of discovery and innovation. Ban Ki-moon Foundation is philosophies for better future of the world. So I would like to extend my warm greetings to everyone present, and I would like to express my sincere appreciation for the opportunity to share our insights and thoughts on such an important topic, SDG 9. This conference, TPSD conference, is a vital platform to exchange ideas, experiences, and best practices on this important issue. Together, we can strengthen our commitment to the implementation of SDGs, which are essential for our common future, for a better future of the world. This year's dialogue is focusing on SDG 9, industry, innovation, and infrastructure. I believe political leadership plays a vital role in fostering sustainable innovation through legislation and development policies. While I was Speaker of the Parliament, Mongolian Parliament undertook significant steps in enhancing legal environment for innovation by adopting a package of laws on innovation, education reforms, including law on innovation, public-private partnership, law on public-private partnership, intellectual property protection law, and education reform, higher education and R&D, and other important laws as a package. Mongolia's legislative framework is instrumental in promoting innovation across various sectors. Legislation is a catalyst for innovation, so through tax incentives, intellectual property protection, public-private partnerships, and educational reform, our parliament, Mongolian parliament, established a robust legal foundation to support research and development, technological progress, and sustainable innovation. As Mongolia diversifies its economy and strengthens knowledge-based sectors, these legislative measures are crucial for creating an environment where innovation can thrive, contributing to the country's long-term economic growth and global competitiveness. It can be said that these legislations laws were adopted based upon the quadruple helix theory. And I think this theory is very much relevant to the SDG 9. The quadruple and quintuple innovation helix framework describes university, industry, government, public environment interactions within a knowledge economy. In innovation helix framework theory used in innovation economics and theories of knowledge, such as the knowledge society and the knowledge economy, each sector represented by a circle or helix with overlapping showing interactions. I believe the quadruple helix theory should be considered for fostering sustainable innovation through legislation. The quadruple helix model incorporates the public-wide concept of media-based democracy. Model incorporates the public-wide concept of media-based democracy and deliberative democracy. While I was serving as a chairman of the parliament, we amended our constitution 2 times using the methodology of deliberative polling, deliberative democracy, which is a Stanford product with Professor James Fishkin from Deliberative Democracy Center of Stanford University. We together organized 2-3 times the deliberative polling with representatives, random samples of the all Mongolian population, and we could do significant major constitutional reforms to strengthen our parliamentary democracy, which helped us to have more representative parliament, high gender equality. So now we added our parliament members from 76 to 126. Now almost not 81 members of parliament. More than 70% of the parliament members are young, new members under 40 years old who are striving for innovation, knowledge-based economy reforms. So education is another top priority for Mongolia, as we believe that human capital is essential for driving sustainable innovation. We are implementing a wide range of programs aimed at improving access to higher education and enhancing the quality of education. Our goal is to foster a culture of innovation, especially among youth. Mongolia is a very young country in terms of population. 1/3 of the population is children under 16 years old, and another 1/3 of the population is young generation under 35 years old. Altogether, almost 65% of the population is under 16, 17 years old, so it's a very young population. So through the adoption of the law of higher education, Mongolia is committed to strengthening university research capabilities and promoting collaboration with the private sector. The law required Mongolian universities to be ranked by international standards, international ranking standards. By the Times Higher Education, which was released yesterday, Mongolian National University was ranked the first time in the Times Higher Education, which is now Oxford University is at the first, and the MIT and other universities jumped up, etc. So the Times Higher Education evaluates universities based on their contributions to SDGs and other criteria. This approach ensures that higher education institutions, training, research, and innovation activities align with broader national goals, thereby enhancing their accountability in delivering equitable public services, including education. Mongolia continues to advance towards sustainable industrialization, despite facing challenges related to infrastructure, labor markets, trade, and institutional capacity. Mongolia is located with two giant neighbors, sandwiched between two giant neighbors, and so in terms of Mongolia's most sparsely populated country in the world. It's 15. Korea, for instance, Korea is bigger than 15 times bigger than Mongolia by population, but 16 times smaller than Mongolian territory. So then we can compare how Mongolia's huge land territory and small population, how infrastructure can be efficient and how infrastructure is not well developed. So that is why we recognize the necessity of developing both physical hard infrastructure, such as railways, roads, and airports, and soft digital infrastructure with an emphasis on sustainability and climate resilience. For instance, by integrating green technology and climate-smart practices into both physical and digital infrastructure, Mongolia is ensuring environmental sustainability, enhancing resilience, and supporting long-term economic development. So on a final note, Mongolia's efforts illustrate the importance of holistic approach to infrastructure development that integrates physical transport networks, digital connectivity, support policy frameworks, and regional partnerships. We believe that other developing nations, particularly landlocked democracies, landlocked countries, can draw valuable lessons from Mongolia's experience in balancing infrastructure expansion, international trade, and sustainable development. By investing in resilient infrastructure, maintaining strong diplomatic ties, and establishing supportive legal frameworks, Mongolia demonstrates a path toward sustainable economic development and greater regional connectivity. Thank you for your attention. So, 감사합니다.
Thank you, Chairman, for giving us some good insights about Mongolia and how it's focusing on this small but very important population. And next, I'd like to call President Eun Mee Kim, and that will take the focus to higher education itself and the role of higher education in fostering sustainable innovation and particularly empowering women in marginalized communities.
Thank you very much for inviting me to this very important forum. I would like to thank Professor Shin Gi-Wook, APARC, for organizing this, and the co-organizer, the Ban Ki-moon Foundation. Could we have my slides up? Yes, I prepared some slides. As a professor, it's hard for me to resist the temptation of using slides. So I prepared quite a few, so you can take a look at them later, if because I don't think I have that much time. I wanted to talk briefly about the mega trends that are affecting higher education these days, and in particular, some of the mega trends that I feel that are critical for women in higher education. That is the digital divide and gender divide that's really affecting higher education, and Ewha's response to these challenges. So first of all, the fourth industrial revolution that we all are witnessing these days, STEM, AI, and these issues are affecting higher education in very important ways, and Stanford is really at the center of all of this. It's not only presenting challenges in terms of new academic fields that universities and higher education must embrace as new fields, but also as a method of education. But as I will show later, this has been compounded with digital divide and gender gap, and especially for someone who's working on sustainable development goals, it's really affecting the global south. Maybe not too much those of us living in the global north, but the global south has been somewhat, I would say, devastated, especially with the pandemic. So I'm going to address those issues later. Now, the UN Sustainable Development Goals is the very important goals, as Secretary General has just mentioned to us. When this was agreed at 2015 at the United Nations, it was a very significant moment in the world. The MDGs that was agreed upon at the United Nations to lead the world from 2011 to 2015 was significant because that was the first time that the United Nations decided to deal with poverty issues for the world as significant, going beyond the UN's mandate dealing with world peace. This was the first time the UN decided, or the members decided, poverty was as significant an issue as security that's affecting the world, and the world must work together to help alleviate poverty and extreme poverty in the world. And MDGs were critical in helping us move forward. Now, Sustainable Development Goals was even more important, I think, in that direction. The MDGs were very good in alleviating and reducing extreme poverty in the world, but we had not done enough in terms of eradicating extreme poverty. So in the Sustainable Development Goals, we made a bold promise to eradicate extreme poverty and move forward reducing poverty. But more important in the SDGs compared to the MDGs is we wanted this to be more inclusive. In the process of making SDGs, we wanted this to be a much more democratic process. We invited all the civil society leaders, more countries in the back door in making the SDGs. So I remember in 2012 in Rio, we all got together underneath these humongous tents, and we all had these little clickers, and we were voting on which goals to be included in SDGs. That was a very democratic, and it was a very, we thought the MDGs were created and given to us by God, but SDGs, it was us in the tent making these goals, and it came from all corners of the world, and it made us very inclusive and participatory. And I think that's why there are 17 goals. As a teacher, you go to the classroom, it's easier for the students to tell the students, now memorize the 8 goals. 17, it was a little more difficult and challenging, but this is the world that we live in. This was also critical because in the MDGs, we dealt with the problems faced by the developing countries and the worst off countries. But in the SDGs, we included goals that affected the global north countries. It was the goals that was to be comprehensive for all of the world, and we were all supposed to work on these goals together. So I think that was really critical. The goal number 17 and goal number 16. Goal number 16 is peace and justice, strong institutions. That was included, I think, thanks to Secretary General Ban Ki-moon. This wasn't part of the original thinking. This was included because the MDGs was supposed to deal with poverty, and SDGs was to take over because MDGs was unfinished, and we had to find a way to continue with the unfinished work business of MDGs. Now, 16 was included because there had to be a better connection between poverty issues and peace issues, and we need to connect them together. Some of us were concerned that if we include 16, that again, we finally included development issues and poverty issues at the UN, and if we include security one more time, it will be securitization of poverty. So some of us who worked all our lives on development, we thought maybe security will take over poverty, and we were very concerned. But Secretary General Ban Ki-moon and others convinced us that if we don't deal with security issues in developing countries or vice versa, we cannot deal with this. We have to deal with them together. So 16 is included, and that's one of the reasons. And 17, very important for us to show global partnership, international commitment to work on this together. So SDGs is an important global platform in the era that we live in that's affecting higher education. And then everything goes kaput with COVID-19. COVID-19 that hit everybody in a tremendously devastating way affected higher education, because higher education, we were overnight told to either close our schools or go digital online. I remember I was on sabbatical leave, so I was like, okay, this is not affecting me, but my colleagues who were getting ready for their retirement wasn't going to go online. They said, oh, let my younger colleagues deal with online education, but they were forced to go online education overnight. They were not prepared. Students were not prepared. Our staff was not prepared. Our hardware was not prepared, but we had to do it. So the COVID pandemic had many repercussions, but in the higher education, it meant that we had to upgrade, transform our hardware as well as software. And these changes were not just temporary, but permanent. And then on top of that, in South Korea, we have a demographic transition and decline of college-age youth. And this has affected Japan and other countries that had gone through earlier demographic transition. But when Korea does it, we do it with gusto, and we do it with more rapidity than other countries. So our demographic transition is happening in greater speed, and it's affecting universities where we have to get our students, and our college age decline is quite dramatic. And then I have to add a little thing. Korea's global gender gap ranking, we're 94th this year, and this is an improvement over the last few years. So this is really, I have to use the word, quite pathetic. So Ewha, as an all-women's university, our challenge is how do we remain competitive as a top-tier research university when in the social milieu of a low gender ranking, gender equality atmosphere. I still get questions when I get interviews as the president. The first question often is, so when is Ewha going to go co-ed? Because you're not very popular. And my predecessor presidents have always said, if the Korean National Assembly or Parliament goes half and half, you then come back. Our parliament has gone nearly half and half, or become more international. We've done the latter. So the big trend that I really think is significant is the digital divide and the gender inequality. The digital inequality, digital divide has become much more serious. I've had the honor of working on the Global Sustainable Development Report that has been mandated by the UN members on doing a meta-analysis of the SDG implementation. I've been on the first authors group. And one of the most significant maps that we looked at is the R&D gap between the global north and the global south. And in that is the digital gap. But I also want to highlight that the gender gap in the digital divide has been very, very significant and very troubling for that matter. And I'll show you the gender inequality, especially in STEM education and AI, has been even more disturbing. Only 35% of STEM graduates are women. Women in OECD countries, only 31% enter STEM vis-a-vis 75% in other fields like education, health, and welfare. Women in STEM education in Europe and other high-income countries drop dramatically beyond second to higher education. So what do institutions like Ewha do? So we go all ahead and buck the trend. So Ewha's innovation in education for women in marginalized countries. So Ewha has been the history of innovation. If we follow the trend, I wouldn't be here, Ewha won't be here. So from the beginning, we were bucking the trend and we're the history of innovation. When Ewha was first founded in 1886, it was by women missionaries from the United States, from the foreign WFMS, Women's Foreign Missionary Society of the United Methodist Church. The United Methodist Church formed this Women's Foreign Missionary Society in 1869 after the, in the aftermath of the Civil War in the United States. Women were not being ordained as missionaries, and women said, well, we do a lot of the work, we should be ordained. So they formed the Women's Foreign Missionary Society and started sending women missionaries abroad, the first one to India. And their mission was to proselytize women, open girls' schools, and medical facilities. And Ewha was the first in Korea to be the beneficiary of that. 1887, we opened the first women's hospital. 1910, ahead of other co-ed institutions, we opened the first four-year college courses. 1946, after the end of the Second World War, we became the first university to receive government accreditation. 1996, we opened the first women's engineering college among women's universities in the whole world. 2008, we have this underground campus. You can come and look. 2019, we opened our second university hospital. 2024, ranked #1 among South Korean universities in gender equality in the Times Higher Education evaluation. and I'll discuss these other things. We currently have 25,000 students, 260 alumni, 15 undergraduate colleges, 15 graduate schools, 2 teaching hospitals, with each 1,000 beds. So what do we do when the world is challenging? We go even with more gusto and have a greater vision. So when I became president, it was right in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic. So we said, oh, we'll use this opportunity to upgrade our ICT system, upgrade our research, and really, when other universities are deciding what we ought to do, we're going to go full force with our commitment for a research university. So we agreed upon the Ewha Vision 2030 Plus, also reflecting my work and our work on UN SDGs, a creative and innovative platform leading to a sustainable society. The first one being a comprehensive research university. Second, working on education as with the fourth industrial revolution, and so on. Innovation through world-class research. We invested internal resources on upgrading our research capability, research on sustainability, and some of the examples I bring here. We have Professor Eun Mee Kim, who's here with us today in environmental science and engineering. We just recruited him with the new research grant that we created called Ewha Frontier 1010, and we're very honored and pleased to have him here working on water management and environment, among other things. We have also done much more aggressively on university industry R&D collaboration, recognizing that university must change. University cannot stay within the ivory tower and conduct research amongst ourselves. But we really have to reach out to society, work with society, find out what the societal problems are, and work with society and industry to solve the problems together. Some of our notable achievements these days is working with Science Code, which is the spin-off of Solvay. And Solvay is interesting because in 1911, or was it 1901, Solvay created the Solvay International Conference, and Madame Curie was invited to the conference. So we have this huge photograph of her, and we're telling our Ewha students, you should be there. We want the first Ewha student or faculty to win the first Nobel Prize in Sciences. I'm just happy to tell you a woman writer from Korea just won the first Nobel Prize in Literature in Korea. Yay, Hanga. She's not Ewha graduate, but she's good. International partnerships and sustainability, like the one we have been doing with Stanford APARC and Ban Ki-moon Foundation. The first two were, part of them were held at Ewha. We also work with industry foundations like Asan Nanam Foundation from Hyundai on climate tech leaders, innovation in research, in education. So another connection with Stanford. I'm very committed to really doing more on AI, and I will tell you a little bit more about that. I've worked with human-centered AI at Stanford, HAI, and Professor James Landay was there earlier this year. Now with COVID-19, it really brought us home that digital transformation is really hitting us, and we have to do something about not only including new fields of education, but the method of education have to change. So the Ewha BEST model is now being researched and now being introduced in our undergraduate and graduate classrooms. Comprehensive student caring system using AI and data science are being introduced. We are now working more with the Global South in terms of scholarships. We had Secretary General Ban Ki-moon with the Ambassador Linda Thomas Greenfield representing the U.S. at the United Nations, talking about SDGs with our students and so on. Ewha and Gender Equality Research Education Service, we have been ranked #1 in the country consecutively for a couple of years. But I'm most proud of our partnerships with the Global South. We have been selecting scholars from the Global South. It's called the Ewha Global Partners Program. We have selected a number of students from the Global South, providing them with a full scholarship package, including travel back and forth from their country. We inaugurated this program in 2006 at Ewha's 120th anniversary, remembering and appreciating the sponsorship that we received as Ewha was founded. Also, Ewha Koika Scholarship. Koika is like the USAID of the United States to support public officials of developing countries. So the conclusion is, innovation has been part of our education, but innovation doesn't stand apart from our academic excellence. Empowering women and supporting marginalized communities has to be part and parcel of higher education. So we have never compromised the most important goal of higher education, which is academic excellence. It has to be integrated. We have tried to enter into important partnerships to implement these, and it has really been important for us to work with APARC, Stanford, and Ban Ki-moon Foundation, and with other important international bodies, Mongolia, among others, working on these goals together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, President Kim. And finally, let me ask my colleague, Francis Fukuyama. Frank, please. We'll now move to how Stanford is trying to address some of these challenges in our contribution. Frank.
Okay, thank you, Jean. As she said, I run a very small Master's in International Policy program here at Stanford. So I want to talk about two topics, which I've given a lot of thought to in the last few years. The first is how to think about climate policy in general and what the appropriate emphasis should be. And then the second is how do you teach public policy, including policy on sustainability. All right, so let me go into the first one. I think that in general, the big issues in climate policy are really not policy goals and objectives. There's a lot of agreement. I mean, all of these COP processes lead to these big agreements where we're going to hit the following goals in a certain amount of time, and there isn't much dissent from that. The big problem is policy implementation. And if you, and the result is that I think the COP process in a certain way has been a big failure, because for the last several decades, they've been setting these ambitious goals, and almost none of them have been reached. Secretary General Ban Ki-moon pointed out that the Paris commitments, everybody is behind on this. And the reason for this is not that they don't believe in these goals. The reason is it's really hard to implement them given the politics of different countries. And therefore, I think that the appropriate focus, if you're worried about governance and political issues surrounding climate policy, you've got to concentrate on the implementation part. And that means you've got to focus not on international conferences, but on national political systems that are failing to actually follow through on the commitments that leaders make. There's no accountability. If you're a leader and you say, okay, we're going to be carbon neutral by 2050, and it doesn't happen, what's going to happen to you? Nothing. You're going to be enjoying your retirement on some beach if you can find a resort that hasn't been washed out by rising sea water levels. There's really no mechanism that actually makes people responsible for actually implementing the things they promise. All right, so you got to focus on national level problems. And there, it's completely political, and it depends on the nature of the political system. I'll just give you one example from the United States. It takes almost 10 years to complete the permitting process for an offshore wind project in the United States. It takes about 7 or 8 years to get the permits in order to build multi-state transmission lines. As a follow-on to the IRA was great because it's the first time that the US Congress actually approved a major package to deal with environmental issues. There was going to be a follow-on bill that was actually a sop to Joe Manchin to get him to vote for the IRA that, among other things, would have reduced permitting requirements for transmission lines, which ought to have been a goal that environmentalists should support if they're really interested in reducing carbon emissions. Among the other things that this bill included was a 2-year limit on public discussions and public input into the building of these transmission lines. And a lot of the environmentalist groups said, no, that's not enough time. You should be able to talk about it for 5 years, if that's what's necessary to really discuss this thing. I mean, it's completely crazy because they were basically undermining their ability to implement something that in theory they should have agreed on. And then, of course, given American polarization, Republicans didn't want to spend the money and the Democrats, wanted to permit everything to death. And so that whole bill died, and we're stuck with the fact that all this wind power is being generated in Texas and Oklahoma, and you can't get it to California because you can't build the transmission line, right? So that's an example of a kind of implementation problem that is preventing the United States from reaching whatever climate goal it has promised in international fora. I can expand the examples of this all over the world because everybody's got a similar sort of thing. You may have noticed, for example, this is the year of elections, and all across Europe, the Green parties have been wiped out, in country after country, the Netherlands, Germany, France, and so forth. Why? Because this is basically a backlash against, so the EU has been very progressive in terms of pushing climate, but it's been really annoying to a lot of specific interest groups like Dutch farmers that really don't want to have to meet the nitrogen abatement requirements that the EU has been specifying. And unless you can figure out a political strategy for reducing that kind of opposition, not only you're not going to get your climate goals, you're going to get swamped by a populist uprising that will, upset the general democratic politics of the entire region. All right, so that's the way I think about climate, is that you got to focus on the implementation challenges, which are ultimately both institutional in terms of the way you structure your institutions and political in terms of the different political actors that are affected by the policy. Now, to get to education, there's a seamless transition from the way I think about climate to the way I think about education, the way I've thought about my own public policy program, which is that in general, public policy education in the United States spends too much time, well, I wouldn't say too much time, but it has a pretty exclusive focus on policy analysis and policy thinking, and it doesn't spend any time on policy implementation. And that's what we've tried to do in my particular MIP program. Jeremy Weinstein, who is now the dean of the Kennedy School, and I worked for a couple of years designing a framework by which you could, in general, solve public policy problems. But the critical thing was you didn't stop at just writing the policy analysis memo using all of your statistical techniques to say what the best policy was. You had to include a strategy for actually implementing that policy under real-world circumstances, and that is really, in a way, a political problem because you have to deal with stakeholders, you have to communicate your goals, you have to bring people aboard so they join a larger coalition to help you get done what you want to do, and that, I think, is a general failing in many public policy schools that really do not teach students to focus on real-world problems of actually getting to an objective. For example, just as an example of this, I mentioned, the public participation features of that energy bill that didn't pass Congress. I think that all of us understand that you cannot do an ambitious infrastructure project without getting a lot of input from the people that are affected by it. I mean, it's crazy to think that you can get away with just designing a project in a, in a room somewhere, in a distant city without talking to people that are being affected. But the way that you talk and the amount of input and the length of time and the deliberative process that you are trying to foster vary tremendously. And we teach a number of cases where that whole thing has been screwed up because people, tried to get input, but they didn't know how to do it properly, or they got it from the wrong sources and in ways that delegitimize the project and so forth. And so unless you can actually think your way through how, as a practical matter of public governance, how do you build support for a kind of project that you're trying to do, you're simply not going to achieve the ends. And so I think that in general, this would be my suggestion. We tried to create a little coalition of public policy schools that wanted to teach, in the fashion that I just described, but it's pretty hardwired that, the prestigious things are being a policy maker and not being actually a policy implementer. But if we're actually going to reach the kind of sustainability goals we set for ourselves, that's what you got to do. All right, thank you.
Thank you very much, Frank. I'm going to, we're running a bit behind time, and so I'm just going to take the chair's prerogative, and we're going to maybe go over a few minutes late. But I just wanted to take this opportunity and sort of building on what Frank was saying. I would like to sort of ask each of our speakers to talk about what they see is the biggest challenge. It's sort of another way of talking about Frank's question about implementation. What is the biggest challenge you think that you face in your particular area? And let me just say that, for example, in terms of climate change, and recently I've been working with people who are the STEM side, and a lot of the problems are not necessarily technological, that you could have the science, but the question is, how do you get the people? How do you get the agents, principal agent problems? How do you get local officials? How do you get businesses? How do you get individuals to actually buy into this and implement the policies? So I would like to hear from each of you and to talk about in your area, what is the biggest challenge? I'm going to start with Eun Mee. I'm going to go the other way. So Eun Mee, why don't you go first?
Thank you, Jean. In higher education, Korea faces a unique challenge with the Korean government and the public. This is very different than the United States or anywhere else in the world. How do I do it gently? In Korea, our tuition has been frozen for the last 16 years. Wow. So how do I deal with that? So my colleagues in the United States, and I've taught in the US for 11 years and lived here for quite a long time, and they said, well, why don't you just have more students? Don't students want to come to university? Yes, they do, but our enrollment is fixed by the government. So that's not a solution. No, that's not a solution. So we have these governmental regulations that make it very difficult for universities to run. So
it's a question of resources. So it's impressive that you were able to do as much as you've done.
Right. So that's a very big challenge right now. And the pact to freeze our tuition has been a political pact by the progressive and the conservative parties together.
But are you allowed to go out and fundraise?
I'm allowed to fundraise, and I do that very, very effectively. Our endowment is one of the largest in the country. However, our tax laws are not that supportive of big businesses to give us big funds because our tax laws are not that forgiving for big donations. So I'm between a rock and a hard place.
Great.
Let me,
Yes, please.
let me speak. With my due respect, I do not agree with you. It's not an issue of resources. Whenever I am asked this question, I get the good sense of passionate or negative sense angry against the political leaders. It's a matter of political will. We have enough resources. Of course, there is no such world where you have enough, but at least to address the climate issues or SDGs, we have resources. We have 21st century technology. And it's a matter of political will of political leaders. How to educate this political will, I think it's up to you. Professors, Professor Fukuyama said that it's, when you said education, but you can educate a student, but they are good students, but when they become, take some political position, they forget everything which they learned.
So
That's
now,
the problem.
So now, good. We're going to just go to you then, because the question for you, because you got all these leaders to agree, but you're absolutely correct. It is political will. So when they go back to their own countries, how would you advise them to have the political will to actually implement the policies?
I have been challenging many leaders. Please, this must be top priority. Then what their answer, so many times, I remember, well, Mr. Secretary General, I fully respect you, I fully support your policies, but let me be first re-elected. If I'm not re-elected, I cannot help you. So what can I say?
Well, no, seriously, this is reality. So
Reality.
what might, I don't know, maybe this is something that could be done as a group, or what might be possible ways to deal with this? Because this is, elections are a reality.
I'm urging you all, not as professors, but as voters, as civil society leaders, you have to challenge your leaders. You have to challenge. First of all, we say that there's no planet B. We don't have planet B. We don't have plan A. That's what I've been saying. We don't have plan A, plan B, because we don't have planet B either. This is what I have been repeatedly saying. Then when you teach your student, they have all voting rights. No, I don't suggest that you all this, make all this politicized. It's not the politicizing. It's teaching proper way of thinking, proper way of behaving as global citizens. Now we are all global citizens. We have to have a global citizenship, global vision.
But there are people who are still denying.
Okay. That's why I'm getting angry. So I cannot do alone. I'm just one person, former Secretary General. Then current Secretary General, whoever is in the sitting, their seat is very delicate. You cannot always confront the world leaders. So then in such a case, they will not pay their due contribution to the United Nations. Then even US President, how much percentage or time US President would devote on climate issue? They always say, this is a top priority. But have you seen how many US presidents speak about climate issues? They speak about Middle East, African issues, or China issues. This is reality. Therefore, it's very hard. That's why It's not the technology, we have technology, not resources. They have enough resources if they have will, if they have political will. So my message always has been, raise your ambition, and with the political will, then it will be much easier. It will be much easier. Can you believe that we have less than 20% of implementation record on 17 goals? We are talking about the main goal is goal 9, industries. And then there is, again, fairness issue, justice issue. The least developing countries, least developed countries, who have contributed the least to current phenomena of climate change, then they are the ones who are impacted the most severely. They're suffering from all this long spell of drought and rains and floodings and drought and poverty. So they have done nothing. It's all mostly European Union Americans who have polluted this world, who have created this climate phenomena now. Therefore, the answer is clear. They have to correct this one. So otherwise, you are a politician, but...
Well,
yes,
let me...
yeah, oh, good, please.
If I may, let me turn to Chairman. Since you just identified as the politician. So as the politician, what do you have to say about this issue about political will? Clearly, you must have faced these challenges as well.
Yes, to a certain extent, I agree and disagree with Secretary General Ban Ki-moon.
You must agree.
Because from Mongolia's perspective, Mongolia's strategic location between China and Russia offers unique opportunities and challenges for this issue significantly. Mongolia is considered oasis of democracy in this region, sandwiched between Russia and China. But our political will is limited in this location. And so how Mongolia's political will can change this part of the world? Secondly, Mongolia has significantly impacted by the climate change, climate impact. Average temperature of Mongolia increased 2.4 degrees of centigrade for the last 8 decades. And we are having a lot of impacts of desertification, drought disaster, which is heavy snowfall and drought. So we are impacted by global warming significantly. Thirdly, of course, we have problem of resources. So I think 17 SDGs are all interconnected, and it must be considered as in one package. For instance, SDG 16, partnership for goals is important. That is why I was calling for action on quadruple innovation helix, which is industry, university, industry, private sector, and civil society should cooperate to implement SDGs together for innovation, industry, infrastructure development. And what I agree with Secretary General Ban Ki-moon is America or European Union, big powers, industrialized countries, developed countries should pay greater attention for the better future of the world, who impacted significantly to the global warming. I think not Mongolia as well.
So, Frank, I'm going to give you the last words. Did you, this reactions to the comments from these world leaders?
I should tell Mr. Zandanshatar that we had a student group last year that actually went to Mongolia and tried to deal with the problem of desertification and grassland overuse and so forth. So they came up with a very interesting and very complicated solution to that problem. So I guess I feel that political will is the wrong metaphor to use because it makes it seem like it's simply an individual matter of the moral fiber of a particular leader and whether they're going to stand strong in favor of the right policy and that sort of thing. You know, what political will really is in practical terms is the ability to build a coalition. And that coalition has to be large enough that it can achieve political power within your particular political system. And therefore, what is described as political will is actually just basic politics. It's the ability to convince people to come over to your side, to neutralize people that don't want to see you succeed, and to get as many people on board as possible. That's the way things, need to work in a democracy. And we use the term political will, but it's actually the skill in that kind of basic political coalition building, I think, that's really, what's needed. And that's what we try to impress on our students.
Great. Well, I think sums up a lot of really the importance of other ways of stating it is, incentives. How do you convince people to do this buy-in? Because you've got great policies, but you have to have them implemented. And I think this was a great start. I want to thank our panel members, and I think that a lot of these discussions that we're going to be having for the next day and a half, we'll be talking about perhaps how to get into more detail. So thank you very much. Sorry to go over.